Grim is the Night is a new module by Dark City Games, a new standalone adventure in their system of games inspired by the old Wizard Melee Fantasy Trip system. So what you're gonna have is a branching adventure, choose your own adventure style, where you navigate a maze of textual paragraphs telling you what's happening. And from time to time, you will interrupt the story and play a battle as a board game on one of these boards. And the situation will tell you use this part of the board, use only this section, and so on and so forth. And the game comes with set of counters representing the enemies and our valiant heroes. Again, old school. I like the retro look of the art that you have here. I will not show you everything, so I'm avoiding spoilers. And so when the situation moves from the book to the tabletop, you're gonna play a battle there, and the game is cooperative, also solitaire friendly. So you're gonna control the enemies in a way that they will make sense. They will usually attack the closest player, the closest character. Controlled by the players. They will move close to the players' characters if they cannot attack, so on and so forth. Very simple. And so what you have here basically is a role-playing game kind of adventure. And again, everything is in here. You have all that you need. You're gonna create your characters by assigning skill points, and so that you can have somebody who's stronger, faster, has magic, etc., etc., etc. Your three main abilities are gonna be strength, dexterity, and IQ. Strength tells you how strong you are, also good at surviving. When you take damage equal or higher than your strength, your character is dead. Dexterity tells you how fast you are. You're gonna move on the board a number of hexes equal to half of your dexterity. Also, you're using that to attack. So you will roll 3 dice, and you're trying to roll equal to or lower than your dexterity. Yes, that's the one thing, is like rolling low is good. Always counterintuitive to me, but mechanically it works. And the IQ is used to cast spells, which are pretty powerful, but also they have an extra cost in that they generate fatigue, and if you have too much fatigue, your character is gonna pass out, but that can recover with rest. Very simple, again, very simple idea, as when there's combat, well, you'll move and then probably attack or use an action that may be to cast a spell or drink a potion, things like that. So that's the general idea of the game system, which is shared by all of these modules here. So you have an adventure here, which is about a little over 100 paragraphs, 100 narrative sections. So, it's not too long. You're probably gonna play it in an evening, and you're gonna see a lot of the stuff in there. So it's not that the replay value is gonna be limited. It's gonna be a fun evening, but it's gonna be that evening, and that's okay. A lot of solitaire adventure modules of that kind have the limited replay value because of the narrative element that is included. Also, because of that, I'm gonna have to be vague about the content, because part of what maybe the biggest joy of the game is discovering the story, discovering the events. So, but I'll tell you what you see from here, the general situations, and then some ideas about how that is handled. You trudge up the narrow trail, scaling the steep slopes of the high mountains, and then you reach a village which is very grim. There is a very, again, gloomy atmosphere. It's always raining. It looks miserable. People keep telling it's a nice village, with the exception when it rains, but there's a lot of rain as you, the party of adventurers, enter the place. What is very interesting is that there is not an obvious mission at the beginning. You start interacting with the characters, and then different things happen. Maybe you start taking what we could call some side missions, and then a larger plot emerges. The initial part of the story to me is the strongest, also the one that feels the most narrative and the most original. It is really story driven. It's about interacting with characters. Yeah, still from time to time going to the board to fight fights. But there's a very strong sense of story. After a while, the main mission becomes clear, and the game becomes a little more typical, a little more conventional, in that you're going to explore different kind of locations and move north, move south, do this, do that, open the door, check what's down there, and so on and so forth. Also, the number of types of enemies and encounters that you will see is not huge. And the kind of enemy, unfortunately, is very stereotypical. You probably already saw from the art, but is the kind of enemy that you encounter in fantasy, especially low-level adventure in fantasy, when sort of like by default. And so after a while, encountering always this kind of enemy, or mainly this kind of enemy, just felt a little repetitive. I think the game does a good job of creating different situations. That kind of enemy attacks in one way with different weapons, sometimes more claustrophobic, sometimes you gotta maneuver around things. But ultimately, it's that kind of enemy over and over again. And so there's a repetitive element that I found a little that kind of like detract a little bit from the experience. And maybe after a while I was like, well, I'm gonna skip this one. I think I'm gonna take a couple extra damage points on these characters. I think more or less that's what's gonna happen. At that point I wanted to see what happened. So it is, despite the title and the thing, I thought maybe it was gonna be dark, gothic kind of thing. It's nice illustration on the cover, not illustrations inside. Again, everything looks like old school. But despite the fact it's always raining and it's grim in the title, after the initial section, when the main objective becomes clear, it becomes a pretty fairly standard high fantasy adventure with, your wizards, your magicians, and yes, your standard enemy in fantasy adventure. And so it was fun, it was interesting. I hadn't played one of these in a while. I was entertained enough. I wish I'd seen a little more ambition, something a little daring, something working a little differently, but I hadn't played the system in a while, and so I found what was a fairly typical, fairly default kind of fantasy adventure, which wasn't maybe as ambitious and exciting as I wanted, but was entertaining because, hey, I'm playing a solo adventure and slaying monsters and collecting treasures. That never gets too old. So this my assessment of Grim is the Night. It feels a bit typical within the family of fantasy adventure games in general, and also when compared to other Dark City games, but it's typical, but it's still good and entertaining.